Infrastructure design process. Now on this visual, we have some key design questions and we have some key design actions. So what should your team infrastructure look like? We've covered team definitions, expectations, outputs, results, and possible investments. Lots of stuff. The choices you have to make here are, first of all, do I focus on work team effectiveness? Do I focus on improving the output of my project teams? Or do I try to improve the effectiveness of both types of teams? To maximize organizational performance, you should try to gradually improve the effectiveness of all team types, including focus teams. It's suggested that you focus on your work teams first, since they are already in place and currently producing results at some level on a daily basis. Remember our definition of infrastructure from earlier in this course, the system that is required to support the use of teams. In this visual, you'll find 7 key questions and 7 key action items that you need to complete as you begin to define your team infrastructure. Also, note that the key resources required to support team growth is time. Team effectiveness, in essence, is directly proportional to the amount of quality time you invest in teams. However, you can only grow so fast. Resource limitations do exist. You should not go team formation crazy. Team leader limitations exist. Another reason not to go team formation crazy. Begin by focusing on your work teams. They already exist. They already have team leaders. Both can be improved. I would go to focus teams after that because their focus tends to be consistent. Their membership does not change as much as project teams often. And you can gain a little bit by improving their effectiveness with some of these meeting management techniques in this course. Use these meetings to share information, performance trends, get feedback, suggestions about possible improvements, recognize efforts. Try to do a daily team get-together to help lay a team-focused foundation for the daily activities each person executes as part of his or her daily job. Example infrastructure blueprint. The team infrastructure blueprint we have here is the same one we saw previously in an earlier lesson. We followed it up with an exercise that asks us to define the different types of teams we currently have for each of the 3 team types. Creating an initial team infrastructure blueprint is a starting point. Comparing different team infrastructure designs using a spreadsheet provides the greatest value because you can look at how resource requirements shift as team configurations and designs change. This blueprint also shows the workforce how the teams are deployed across different team types, work groups, and teams. You can use the blueprint to show how many people are on each team. If your site has fewer or 60 people, you can set up the blueprint using the names of your staff instead of departments as your rows. Linked blueprints using a spreadsheet such as Excel can also be created. Begin by defining your work teams as they're already in place. Second, define your focus teams. You might currently have a lot of them, probably too many of them. You want to closely align your focus teams with the key strategic objectives of the site, business unit, or company. The number of project teams you list depends on what you can effectively support versus what is needed to support the defined process improvement rates. Consider creating a before and after team infrastructure blueprint to help you visually see the savings that can be gained by streamlining your use of teams. Use this approach to help you manage the number of teams each person is on and to help you identify which groups need to get more involved. Finally, keep in mind that the team infrastructure blueprint can be site-specific or organization-wide. Infrastructure design tools. The 6 tools shown here can help you define your team infrastructure and support requirements. The team infrastructure blueprint was further explained on the previous page. The roles played by each of the remaining infrastructure design tools are further defined below. So notice in the list of 6 at the very bottom is the team infrastructure blueprint. That's what we just looked at. Now we want to look at the other 5 items on the list. We have job descriptions. Each job description in your organization should reflect team membership and leadership responsibilities if you really want to effectively support your teams. At least state work team membership. Ideally, the percentage of time a person is expected to devote to team involvement or support should be reflected in their job summary. The next thing that helps you define an effective team infrastructure are your goals and strategies. The names of your project team should mirror those of your most significant improvement initiatives that would benefit from team-based development. Additionally, the decision matrix that your teams use to select possible improvements should be based on the goals and strategies of the site or the organization, as should your organization's recognition plans and process. Third, we have the key project database. High-performing organizations keep all of their current and possible improvements in one database. This practice helps the organization's leaders better define what needs to be worked on at first during the planning process because all possible options can be seen. They're all there. In such a system, mechanisms also exist to give each employee the ability to add an improvement idea to the database. If they think of something that's not already listed, it's easy to put that in. However, the design of the database forces the idea submitter to link their idea to the goals of the company, and it allows them to see if the idea has already been entered or is being developed by someone else or some other group. Team expectations. A worksheet is provided in this workbook to help you identify both results-focused and relationship-focused expectations for each of your teams. If you really want to measure team performance over time, these expectations must be defined first. Finally, we have an investment worksheet, and an example investment worksheet and explanations of how to use it are provided in the next steps and action planning lesson for this course. The importance of time. Time is required for formal learning, process analysis, project development, building ownership, building relationships. The growth and significance of any improvement effort is directly proportional to the amount of time invested in it. Keep in mind that management groups that meet regularly are also part of your work team and focus team infrastructure. Too many organizations assume that leadership and management groups are already effective, but think about it. Do you get 60 minutes of value from your 1-hour management meetings? In reality, many management teams are the worst when it comes to sticking to an agenda, having a shared vision of what the management team exists for, managing their group dynamics effectively, using management team meeting wisely, or getting true value for the cost of their management meeting time. Because work teams already exist, team membership, leadership, and meeting options are already defined by the nature of their job. You can definitely improve the effectiveness of the time they spend together, but you don't need to create new teams. You don't need to define a new team focus or provide additional leaders, and that's a big deal. These distinctions set work teams apart from project or focus teams, and they are important. Most organizations also have at least one focus team. Safety committees and leadership teams are the most commonly found types of focus teams. Their needs are best aligned with those of project teams, but since focus team members also are work team members, any investment you make in work teams affects the performance of focus teams. That's why incorporating your continuous improvement process elements into your standard work efforts is so key. Adding project teams to your team infrastructure will require making significant additions to your team support system. So you don't have to use project teams. After people get used to the dynamics of working in a group and they learn more about the business, you should begin increasing the degree to which all employees are involved in project or focus teams. Start small. Try to get 3 or 4 such teams going. Then you work closely with the initial teams to ensure they're making progress. Make sure they're properly supported. As you do, you get a better idea of how much support a larger group of project teams or a larger group of focus teams might require. We've got a worksheet for identifying potential leaders and facilitators. It's not complicated, but it's important. The number of effective focus and project teams that your company can support is directly dependent on the number of effective team leaders and facilitators that you have. So this worksheet will help you identify those numbers. It begins by listing the skills of an effective team leader. We list the skills of an effective facilitator. You list your potential leaders that meet those qualifications next. Then you list your potential facilitators that meet the qualifications, and then do the math. Who should lead or facilitate your teams? If yours is like most organizations, you probably have a limited number of good team leaders and facilitators. Recognizing this limitation should serve as the primary constraint over how many teams you have in operation at any given time. In terms of maximizing the payback per people hour invested, ensuring that each project team has a good leader and that facilitators are not spread too thin are probably 2 of the best team-related investments you can make. Be careful in forming your operational definitions for team leader and facilitator. While both titles convey responsibility and require acceptance of it, they more importantly represent an individual who has a certain set of skills. Base your definitions of team leader and facilitator on the skills required. Then make an effort to select people for these positions that have these skills or can develop them quickly. So let's look at the difference between the 2 terms very quickly. Team leader. Team leaders plan the team's project development work in each meeting. They address team behavior issues that emerge. Team leaders inspire their team members to reach higher levels of performance, and they work to ensure that team resources are available and used in the most effective manner possible. Facilitators. Good facilitators support team leaders by sitting in on their meetings, observing the team in action, and providing the leader with coaching as to how they could have led the group even more effectively. Facilitators are also skilled at leading groups through training exercises and other larger group activities. Facilitation should be seen as a step above team leadership in terms of skill requirements. In many cases, simply holding a leadership position in the company does not mean you can apply team leadership and facilitation skills effectively. We often make that assumption, however, that if someone has been trained to be a manager or supervisor, they must also be an effective team leader or facilitator. In reality, however, most managers or supervisors have not had any more quality experience filling these roles than your other staff. People in general are not culturally conditioned or taught in school to be effective team members, leaders, or facilitators. If your organization plans on moving towards an interstate type infrastructure where you have lots of teams and empowerment, then you need to make learning team leadership and facilitation skills mandatory for all formal managers and supervisors. The word learning should be stressed here. It's not intended to mean merely participating in training sessions on such topics. Instead, it means that people who hold formal leadership positions can demonstrate on a consistent basis that they can use these facilitation and leadership skills effectively. And then they support that skill application with complementary belief and behavior, but practice is mandatory. For example, good facilitators and team leaders need to be good listeners. They need to be effective at asking open-ended questions. They need to be able to observe and adjust to the dynamics of the group while they're working with it. In many companies, leaders or facilitators are those people who stand up at the front of the room and tell you things, but that's not the definitions we have here. One does not deserve the title of team leader or facilitator simply because they're the one who gets to do the most talking. Leaders speak last. The best leaders and facilitators ask more questions than anything else, and they build a stronger team by getting all team members to make regular contributions. To be a better leader or facilitator, certain skills must be practiced on a regular basis. They cannot be learned, let alone mastered, just by reading a book or participating in a few days of training. Well, that's the end of Lesson 10. We covered a lot of ground, but it's important ground because if you don't support your teams effectively, they won't produce and they will fail, and that affects all kinds of things in a negative sense. So that wraps up Lesson 10. We're going to plan for improvement in Lesson 11. Look forward to seeing you there. Keep improving.